So today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most feature-rich robot vacuums that you can buy. This is Ecovacs Deebot X1 Omni, and today we're going to put it to the test. And this is no easy, it's going to clear up a couple of crumbs test. This is a proper test, a test it should fail. And the reason I do this test is that I want to find out what the absolute limit of this vacuum is. No vacuum is safe. So first of all, before I start, I do want to thank Ecovacs for sponsoring this video and for sending me this robot vacuum to put to the test. But despite that, I am going to be doing this properly. I'm going to be putting this to the test, giving you the results and giving you my honest feedback about what's great and what maybe isn't so great. But first of all, let's take a look at what we got. Now essentially, Ecovacs' Deebot X1 Omni is broken up into a few different sections. You have Ecovacs, which is the company, the Deebot, which is the sort of section of things that they do, which is one of their robot vacuums. You have the X1, which is this particular model of vacuum, and the Omni, which is the base unit that it pairs up with. The robot vacuum is pretty standard in size compared to other robot vacuums, but the base station is huge. And the reason for it is that it does an absolute megaton of different things, and because of those things that it does, it needs to have certain storage space for things like a dust bag that it empties into, and 2 water tanks for clean water and dirty water. Now in the box we do get the vacuum itself along with the base station and a bunch of different accessories. We get 2 dust bags, we get 2 sets of mop pads, we even get cleaning utensils to help us clean the vacuum and to clean the base station. And the base station has a bunch of components in it, including the 2 tanks for the clean and dirty water. Now the base station you will plug into a wall, and that is where the vacuum is going to go back to charge, and it will also do things like empty itself and clean its own mopping pads. Also included in that base station is a way of drying the mop pads after they've been cleaned, so that you're not getting a massive build-up of germs and bacteria as it just sort of sits on stagnant wet pads. So once we're physically set up, we pair the robot to the Ecovacs app, and we can do everything that we need to do to control it from there. Now we're going to go into some of these tests, and what I'm going to do between these tests, I am going to explain a few more different features about the vacuum. I have deposited 2 substances on my carpeted floor. That is flour and broken up cornflakes. Now some of these cornflakes are fine like dust and some of them are pretty whole. Run the test. So hello everyone and welcome to our first test, the hoovering carpet test, featuring flour and cornflakes. Here comes the X1. So we begin by proceeding around the room and getting a decent loop in so it can map out its entire environment to vacuum. Now once it gets its map in its head, it then begins on getting rid of these cornflakes and the flour. So it's a pretty decent start from the X1, and it gets that first bit of flour. Look at that, straight sweep clean. Nothing wrong with that at all. And as you can see, it is absolutely powering through the cornflakes, knocking them everywhere. It's even going around trying to pick up some of the pieces that it flicked around. What a good little vacuum it is. Now I will stress that this vacuum is not designed to be doing stuff like that. And ooh, missed a big chunk there. Let's get a replay of that. Yeah, you can see it just passing over a big amount of flour. Now this vacuum isn't designed to be picking up such large quantities of stuff, especially the powder that's in the carpet. That's a decent large amount of powder, so I'm not surprised it didn't get it in the first go. But we are going to be doing another sweep, so let's see what we can do by clearing it up and going around another couple of times. So we have finished our first sweep and there is still powder residue on the floor, so we're going to keep going and see what we can actually do and how clean we can get this carpet. All of the cornflakes gone on the first sweep, massively impressed with that. It's just this powder that's stuck in the carpet. So let's see what the X1 can do. Obviously after a couple of sweeps back and forth, we can see that there is a big difference from what we started with. However, it is still obvious that there's been flour on the floor. And I'll be honest, I am actually massively impressed. This vacuum shouldn't be getting anywhere near a clean floor in this circumstance, and I am massively impressed at how much of a difference is actually made. So before I jump into the next test, we're going to take a look at some key features of the X1 Omni. Now on the front of the vacuum are a few cameras and sensors, as well as a LiDAR sensor on the top. The LiDAR sensor is designed to help map the area around that it's going to clean, and then the cameras do things like detecting smaller objects that it needs to avoid. And it can detect if your pet has pooed on the floor, so it doesn't go in and clean it up, but it can also detect things like wires and socks, and that can stop it going over anything that might get sucked up and cause it or the vacuum damage, or just tangle up in the vacuum and require your input to have to go in and fix it. Now, as well as that, is that you have a camera that you can actually access from the app, and I'll get onto that in a bit. But we do also have voice control. Just having a smart assistant straight away in the vacuum, that's pretty cool. And this vacuum allows you to summon it, start and stop the cleaning, tell it to clean particular rooms or around particular items of furniture that it recognizes and remembers. And it can even find your voice and come to you and clean in the area that you're stood. Now, when you set the vacuum to English, because I am English, I come from England, it actually has an American English accent. Now, that's not going to be a problem for any of you that are American, but if you are British like myself and you have an accent like myself, it can sometimes struggle to recognize you, and you have to sort of put on a funny American accent to get it to actually do anything. So it still works, but I do sound like an idiot in front of my wife. Look, my accent is my only decent feature. And another cool feature, which is great with this robot vacuum, is the mop. Now, there are a ton of vacuums that can do mopping, but they tend to just sort of drag a bit of wet fabric across the floor behind it. This is an actual active mopping system. It has two circular mop pads that will rotate 180 times per minute, and that as it's going along is actively spinning round and mopping the floor, and it creates probably one of the most, if not the best, mop that you can get on a robot vacuum. And this leads us into our next test, the mopping test. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to test 2, the mopping test. The first substance is coffee on the top left. On the top right, we have some kids' squash. Bottom left, we have some wine spilt from the night before. And on the bottom right, we have some dried strawberry yogurt. Now, all of these substances have been spilt and left to dry for a couple of hours. So we're straight into it, and the X1 is going around and doing its loop, but it is already making a massive dent on this mess on the floor. In the first sweep, just going around the edge, we can see a huge difference made to the wine and also to the dried kids' squash. Now, this is having a little bit more of a challenge with the coffee, but it is making a big difference. Let's see how it gets on going on the last two. So for a mess like that, which shouldn't be handled by this, I mean, the X1 has done a pretty good job of getting into it, but it hasn't actually fully cleaned up any of the tiles on one swoop. But we do have a bit of an issue over there by the squash. The mops aren't actually getting as close to that barrier as we can possibly see. It is leaving just an area of unmopped surface where it can't reach the actual area. Now that we're on our final pass, we are seeing some of the progress that's been made by the X1. Unfortunately, it's not fully done on two of the areas, the dried yogurt and the dried milky coffee. Now that is obviously to be expected. It's not an easy thing to mop, but let's see how it handles it on one final swoop. You see back and forth over there on the coffee, and actually that's made an absolutely huge difference. The tile is almost pretty clean. Wine, as it's been for a while, is completely gone. And the yogurt, again, that final swoop has made an absolutely huge difference and has pretty much cleared the entire place. The only real limitation is over where the mop wasn't able to reach because it was too close to the wall. Now, whilst not necessarily getting a perfectly clean floor, this has actually done an absolutely surprisingly fantastic job, especially considering these are the kind of substances that if you've spilt on the floor, you need to be getting on your hands and knees and cleaning, and you need to be scrubbing them to get them off. And the fact that this robot hoover has done what it's done is incredibly impressive. Now, before we get into the last test, I'm just going to break down some of the smart features that you can get with the camera on this robot vacuum. So the X1 has a camera on the front of it, and you can log in on the app and remote control around your own house and sort of check whether a door's been left open, or the fridge is open, or the oven's turned on. You can also check if someone's got home from work, or the kids have gotten home from school. And maybe you have a pet at home that you want to check on. You can actually go into the app and find them, and even talk to them through the vacuum. The vacuum has microphones on it that picks up noises in your house, but it also has speakers so that you can talk back through it. And there's also a feature on there to do an automatic sweep around the map of your house that you've made. And now I do pride myself on testing the things that I am reviewing and testing them properly. And in this next test, I may have pushed that too far. Now I have to be honest, when I'm testing something like this, I do get a little bit excited, and I get a bit excited about cool features. So the fact that this has got these spinning mops, I think that's amazing. The fact that it's got this super awesome suction power, I think, oh yeah, great. What I don't fail to realise is that the tests that I do aren't necessarily the tests that this thing is intended to be dealing with on a daily basis. Like in the mopping test, where ultimately, if that stuff is on your floor, you need to be cleaning it up yourself. You're not going to be leaving that for your robot vacuum. Your robot vacuum is there to clean the large area that you don't want to have the time to do. If there's an intense bit of dirt on the floor and you need to clean it, like, just get on your hands and knees, what you're playing at. So what I did, I dispersed flour and cornflakes, as I normally do, across the entire living room floor and threw out some different obstacles for the vacuum to meet and try and avoid. But what I did fail to realise is that, unlike with something like salt, which dissolves pretty easily in water, flour doesn't do that. Flour turns into a disgusting doughy mess, and the last thing you want to be doing is vacuuming up dough. Let's run the test. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to test number 3, the vacuum obstacle test. Today we are going to be hoovering up flour and cornflakes. Now, we are fully aware that this has been set up in a way that could cause some issues. We're going to be sending out the vacuum with the mop mode activated. So, what is the water going to do to this floury mess? We shall have to see. Okay, so the X1 has begun its vacuuming journey. It is currently going around the outside of the area to map exactly where needs to be cleaned, so then it can go in and work out the middle afterwards. As you can see initially, not many issues currently. Going around the edges seems to be doing a pretty good job. The only problem is that the brushes on the outside are flicking and moving the obstacles and the things that it needs to clean up away from the vacuum in certain areas. So let's see if the vacuum can handle that and go and pick up the bits that it knocks out of the way. Now the X1 has successfully dodged a few obstacles there. It's doing absolutely fantastically. Now we've got these little steps that aren't really recognisable to the vacuum as a particular object, but it is doing a perfectly fine job of navigating its way around. And what it does is it stores a map of exactly where it's been, so it knows if there's an area it's missed and it can go back and get that particular area, just as it's doing right now. I've got to say, the look of determination on the X1 is inspirational. This is a challenge that it never should have to face, and I doubt it will ever face again, but it is taking it on like an absolute champ. The majority of the floor has been taken care of already, and is still going back to get all of the missed pieces. Now, according to the X1, it's saying that it thinks it is done and has found its way back to the base station. Now, as we can see, there are some areas that it's missed, and this will be down to the obstacles that are in the way. It just couldn't quite find itself an easy path through to collect it. Now, there are quite a few areas where they are hard to reach, and the vacuum has missed certain things. And despite pretty much clearing up about 90% of the area, there is an almost fine film of flour across the floor where it struggled to clean the wood. So I do have to be honest, it didn't pass this test, and that isn't its fault. It shouldn't pass this test. No robot vacuum is ever going to pass this test, and if it does pass this test, well then fair play. But what I do have to say is that with the areas that it could get to, it cleaned up all of the flour. I mean, it almost killed the vacuum, but it did the job. And I'll be clear, the vacuum didn't die. It was just covered in like this doughy mess. And after spending a little bit of time with myself and some of the cleaning utensils that are included in the box, I did manage to resurrect it. And I managed to clean it up, and it's working just as well as it did before. But from these tests, I have a few key takeaways. I have some positives and I have some negatives. This is probably one of the most feature-rich vacuums that you can possibly buy. It's got an unbelievable amount of things that it can do, and there's a massive variety of things that you don't have to do because it does it all itself. Now, unfortunately, with these spinning mops, you have positives and negatives. The positives are are, you get cleaner floors than you would get with any other robot vacuum, except at the edges of a room. It actually struggles to get those mops around the borders. So if you have skirting boards, anything around the borders of your house, you're going to struggle to mop the direct edges unless it's turning around at that point. Now, the fact that this has voice control and you don't actually have to get your phone out to tell it to do stuff, you can get it to do stuff with just your voice. That is actually probably one of my favorite features of this robot vacuum. The fact that I have to pretend to be an American is probably one of the most annoying things, but I love the voice control, and I think that if you're looking for a vacuum which just gives you a level of ease, I would say that's probably one of the main features of this vacuum that should sell it for you. The self-cleaning is fantastic, and the fact that it deals with the mops all by itself, brilliant. And it isn't completely human intervention less. You do have to do some things. So if you want to switch between vacuum and mopping mode, you have to take off the mops. It's easy to do, but it's something that you have to do. I mean, that lends into a positive that this will detect carpets. By the fact that it automatically vacuums more on carpet, obviously that's a good thing, and it'll actually detect carpet and not go on carpet if the mops are on. It means you're not going to be getting your carpet wet, but also not going to be spinning these horrendous mops around your carpet and ruining it either. And obviously you do have to empty the tanks. For now, I'm more than happy to go in and fill up the water tank and empty out the dirty water between cleans. Obviously you're not going to have to do it between every single mop. It's going to take a couple of weeks or so to be able to have to do that. So guys, those are my thoughts about this robot vacuum. What are your thoughts? Stick them in the comments below and click one of these videos to see more from me. And I'll see you in the next one.